we present Kenneth Williams, Peter Jones, Tim Rice and Libby Purves in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello, and welcome again to Just a Minute. And as you've just heard, we have two guests playing this week, along with two of our regulars. And we welcome back, after his successes in the last series, Tim Rice, and with him, Libby Purves. And we have, of course, Kenneth Williams and Peter Jones. And who better? Now, I'm going to ask them to speak, if they can, on the subject that I will give them, and they will try and do that without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from the subject. And we'll begin the show this week with Kenneth Williams. And, Kenneth, the subject is magic. Can you tell us something about that in the game, starting now?
Magic is a quality which has often been attributed to me. People cry out, "Oh, when he appears, it is magic." And I was in a show once with a man who was a member of the Magic Circle. And he produced such tricks from a little box which he held in his hand, and he always said to the audience, "It's quite an ordinary piece of apparatus, you see. It has a top side, and it has a back. Oh, naughty."
Peter Jones has challenged.
Hesitation.
Yes, I'm afraid when you tried to get out of your problem of not repeating the word side, you did hesitate, Kenneth.
What, did you think that was hesitation? I didn't hesitate at all. No, it wasn't hesitation. The point was the man always said top side, back, oh, naughty. Because he wouldn't say the word, because it means something rude. Do you follow me? It's a reference to the posterior, and the man didn't want to make a reference to the posterior. Do you understand? So it wasn't a hesitation. I was actually repeating the dialogue which he used.
Well, he must have paused as well when he used that dialogue.
However, if you rule that it's hesitation, I would not argue with you, Nicholas. No.
What has come over you, Kenneth?
No, if you so rule, I vow I am deferential when it comes to the chairman. Yes, deferential.
Yes, I'm sure. You always do that, Kenneth,
right.
And I admire you for it. And I'm afraid I have to give the challenge to Peter Jones, so he gets a point for that, and also takes over the subject of magic. And there are 29 seconds left, starting now.
Well, magic has nothing whatsoever to do with conjuring or dragging rabbits out of your trouser leg and making it appear as though they're coming from a top hat. Magic is something that exists, say, for instance, in a theater just before the curtain is about to rise. A hush falls over the entire building. People are waiting anxiously for something extraordinary to happen. And the actors...
Normally Ian Messiter sits beside me in Just a Minute, but Ian unfortunately isn't well today, so I have the lovely Leonie beside me, who is not only keeping score, and she's blowing the whistle. That's why it had such a feminine ring to it when she blew it. Normally it goes with more panache than that. The whistle tells us, by the way, the 60 seconds is up, and whoever speaks at that particular moment gains an extra point, and of course it was Peter Jones, who is the only person to have scored at the end of the first round. And Peter, I see, according to the chart in front of me, you are next to speak, and the subject is dressing in a hurry. Can you tell us something about that subject in Just a Minute, starting now?
When my children were very small, I used to demonstrate how easy it was to get dressed in a hurry. And I would whisk off my jacket, tie, shirt, trousers, shoes, socks, underwear, until I was wearing only my Y fronts, and it could be done in about...
Tim Rice, you've challenged.
This is undressing in a hurry.
A very good challenge.
You have
Tim.
to get undressed before you can get dressed. You can't get dressed when you're wearing a full suit of clothes.
It is, I think that's a very good challenge.
Yes,
it is
it's
dressing
quite a
in
good
a hurry.
challenge.
So you should have started from the position when you were undressed.
But I wouldn't appear in the sitting room in the nude.
Well, in Just a Minute you can do anything. Tim, I agree with your challenge. You take over the subject of dressing in a hurry, and there are 43 seconds left, starting now.
When dressing in a hurry, at full speed that is, I always put all the clothes in dressing order in a line on the floor. I start with what has to go on first, which in my case is my left sock. I follow this speedily with my right article, that woolly thing that goes on the end of your foot. This is followed in turn by my left...
Peter Jones, a challenge.
Well, he did say foot twice. Of course, he's got 2 feet, but he did say it again.
He did indeed. He also said followed more than once. So, anyway, there are 16 seconds with you, Peter, on the subject of dressing in a hurry, starting now.
Well, having stripped down to my shorts, I used to put on the trousers, the shirt, the tie, and everything. Could be done in 32 seconds on a good night. Sometimes, of course, if one was interrupted by a caller, they were ushered into the sitting
Tim
room.
Rice is challenged.
Why would he be dressing at night? He should be undressing at night.
Well, he might be going out to the theatre or something.
It was by way of a
shows, he would
demonstration.
definitely dress for it.
It was for the children's benefit,
Yes,
you see.
Oh, with the children's benefit.
Yes, show them how
that's the
quickly
evening.
it could be done.
I know. So, Tim, I disagree with the challenge. And once again, Peter, you have, with an incorrect challenge with only 1 second to go, starting now.
Take them off as fast as you possibly can.
So Peter Jones is running away with it this week. Not only speaking as the whistle went again, getting that extra point, he's now in a commanding lead over Tim Rice, who begins the next round, and the subject, Tim, is drink. Will you tell us something on that in the game, starting now?
I'm very well qualified indeed to talk about this topic, drink, because I hardly ever do. So I'm able to watch from a totally unbiased position the follies and problems that people get involved with when they have too much to drink. I can remember my father telling me back in 1944, when I was a wee broth of a lad, son, lay off the bottle. It won't do you any good. Stick to Tizer and Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola, 7-Up, orange juice, apple juice, grape juice.
Kenneth doing chance.
Well, surely there were 2 colas.
No, there was 2 juices.
There were 2 colas. You said Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola.
But they're hyphenated. I'm trying to help you.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, there were 2 juices.
That's right, yes.
I meant that. That's right. That's what I meant. Yes, I was thinking of advance of myself.
Yeah. There were 2 colas. Well, Kenneth, you have a point at last. And you have the subject in 31 seconds on drink, starting now.
Well, the drink that you must not take is when you're dressing in a hurry. Arthur Murray was very eloquent on that subject, and he said, never drink while you're dressing in a hurry.
Peter Jones challenged.
He said never twice.
No, dressing in a hurry is the subject.
No, it isn't. Drinking. He was trying to avoid repeating the word drink. Maybe you'd like to try and catch up. The subject before that was magic. And we're now on drink, and Peter Jones has the subject, and 22 seconds left, starting now.
Drink is the solace of the rich, the ruin of the working classes. Now, that was said to me by a man who was really quite crocked at the time. And I don't know what class he pretended to be coming from, but his name was Jowett. And he wrote...
Tim Rice challenged.
There was an in there.
Yes, yes, that definitely.
There was an
There's
yes.
a couple of errors there, yes.
There were,
And
yes.
that is without hesitation. So, Tim, 4 seconds for you on drink, starting now.
My favourite drink of all, I think, is that lovely brown liquid entitled coffee.
So Tim Rice was then speaking as the whistle went, and he's moved forward. He's still 2 points behind our leader, Peter Jones. Kenneth Williams in 3rd place, and Libby Purves yet to score, but she begins the next round. And Libby, the subject is keeping cool. You've been demonstrating it perfectly up to now. Would you go on it for 60 seconds if you can, starting now?
Keeping cool is very important when participating in such a program as Just a Minute and being beleaguered by the chairman, refusing your perfectly justifiable challenges. However, the way in which keeping cool is maintained under these circumstances is simply to look at him and say, who does he think he is anyway? Repeat this several times and you will find your cool...
Peter Jones has challenged.
Well, if you repeat it several times, of course, you go out of the game.
I haven't repeated it yet.
But I actually did repeat 2 words several times. I must give it to you, Peter. And 35 seconds on keeping cool, starting now.
The best thing is to adopt the yoga method and sit on the floor, crossing your legs, and breathe deeply and quietly, in and then out. And this will make you feel a lot better, more at peace with the world, and consequently cooler in the sense that you're not excited or excitable. And
Libby Purves challenge.
There was a hesitation in the middle of excitable.
No, I don't think it was a hesitation.
Kenneth agrees with me.
Why would I knew how the word
I
was going to
agree with Libby
finish?
as well.
Why would I hesitate in the middle of it, except to give it a certain nuance which it might not have had?
Because you thought you were repeating yourself.
No, I
and
didn't, of course
you
I
had to
didn't.
put the bull
Just
on
drink.
the end.
I'm just debating. I'll tell you what I'll do. Because I want to be kind to Libby Purves, and it was debatable, I will let the audience be the final judge. We haven't done this for ages. You be the judge of whether that was hesitation or not. And if you agree with Libby's challenge, you cheer for her, and you boo for Peter Jones if you disagree with the challenge, and you all do it together now! Well, it's still the same. It's a draw, wasn't it? I would say the benefit of the doubt we give it to Libby Purves as she was our guest. So, Libby, you take over the subject of keeping cool, and there are 14 seconds left starting now.
The extreme wisdom of our chairman in giving us the subject of keeping cool is clear to me when I remember my times in hot climates. What you must do is not to get hot. You must keep cool.
Peter Jones has challenged.
A repetition of must.
Yes.
I did
You
too.
must. You must, I'm afraid. And 3 seconds, no, 2 seconds only, Peter, on keeping cool starting now.
Put your head on a bucket of ice. And
So Peter Jones, again speaking as the whistle went, increased his lead, and he's got a very commanding lead in this particular game of just a minute. And Peter, will you begin the next round? The subject is takeaway meals. Will you tell us something about those in the game starting now?
they're a great boon to the host or hostess or person who doesn't really want to cook or is busy, but I don't really like those buns with minced up bits of old cow cooked inside. I think it's a great pity that they don't have more vegetarian takeaway meals. They do have roast potatoes, but apart from that, there's very little.
Kenneth Williams.
Pity they do, pity they don't, pity then they
Do
don't.
have, yes.
Right.
Kenneth, 36 seconds are left for you to take over the subject of takeaway meals starting now.
Takeaway meals has nothing to do with what Peter Jones was just expounding.
Libby Purves has challenged.
A deviation from grammar. He said takeaway meals has nothing to do. Not takeaway meals have nothing
Well,
to do.
Libby, we do, because of the difficulties and pressures of keeping going in this game, if one becomes rather colloquial in one's English and phraseology, we do let people get
Takeaway
away.
meals has nothing to do. That's not even colloquial.
Well, it may be bad grammar, but I think if we always challenge Kenneth on bad grammar, we never get going most of the time. So we let him get away with it. Keep the subject. 32 seconds starting now.
Like what I was saying earlier.
Repetition. He was saying it earlier.
Yeah, but he didn't repeat it. You've got to actually repeat. Tim, yes.
Well, it was an enormous hesitation.
When the audience laughs as enormously as that, then I do think we allow a little bit of dramatic license on that. So Kenneth still has the subject, and there are 27 seconds on takeaway meals starting now.
Takeaway meals are those portions of food which people cry out to the waiter, take away! They don't want to eat it. And why don't they? Because the woman who brought her poodle in and had it taken to the kitchen and then served to her as a hot dog is rightly saying, I object, because it's a cruelty to animals. And that's what most of this takeaway rubbish is. Cruelty to animals.
Too much. Yeah. Too much cruelty to the animals. Yes. 6 seconds on takeaway meals, Tim, starting now.
If you are...
Peter Jones challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes, he didn't get in there. There were 2 seconds, I'm afraid, Tim. 4 seconds left for you on takeaway meals, Peter, starting now.
Most takeaway meals should really be throwaway meals. They're not worth eating.
And there goes the whistle again, and Peter Jones was speaking. He has a lead of 5 points over Tim Rice, who has now been joined in second place by Kenneth Williams, and Libby's trailing just a little behind them. Tim begins the next round, and the subject is putting on a show. Will you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
Putting on a show is an extremely difficult undertaking, which I do not recommend to anybody, at least of all somebody who has ambitions to make a whole pile of money, acres, boodle, lettuce, call it what you will. You almost certainly will fail in your target if you attempt to put on a show. I can say this from bitter experience. I can recall back at 1956 or possibly 7, when I was asked to put on a show at Lancing College which is a very wonderful establishment down in Sussex. The fees are quite reasonable still, well under £5,000 a year. And this particular show that I was asked to...
Peter Jones a challenge.
Well, he was hesitating a bit.
Yes, I admit it, I lost my grip completely.
Yes, I was surprised that...
Oh, I wouldn't say that. I don't
challenged him on
think,
deviation.
I just thought he hesitated. He wasn't having a nervous breakdown or anything. Just a bit of hesitation.
And even that would be not unusual on Just a Minute. Putting on a show with 23 seconds left, starting now.
In Hollywood musicals, people used to have a great deal of trouble doing this until somebody would suggest putting it on in the barn. And they'd get Tommy Dorsey and his orchestra to fly down to some obscure place in the country, and it would be a huge success and be taken to Broadway, and the people would be stars overnight. This happened over and more often than...
Libby, you managed to press your buzzer just before the whistle, and your challenge is over and... Pause for a word to replace over. So well done. Got in with half a second to go. Putting on a show starting now.
Let's do...
So Libby Purves speaking as the whistle went, and now she begins the next round. The subject, Libby, is sharks. Can you tell us something about those in the game starting now?
Of all the fish in the ocean, to ladies forbearing and mild, though his record be dark, the man-eating shark will eat neither woman nor child. This song, sung by many generations of mothers to their babies and grown men to their sons, has spread a most...
Tim Rice challenge.
I thought she was hesitating as badly as I was.
Yeah.
I was
I
floundering.
know you thought that, but I didn't think that, so she keeps the subject. Now, let's have a little chivalry. She's training a little. She's our guest. She hasn't played as often as...
He didn't show in any chivalry, and he's out there. He's a guest, too.
I know, but he's been on a guest more
You're just
often.
trying to get round her. We know what you're after. Yes, I thought we done last time with her.
So, we're going to be generous to Libby on this one and say you have 41 seconds on sharks, Libby, starting now.
I was going to say that if a shark showed mercy, it would be a suspension of the laws of nature, wondrous to behold. But now that I have seen compassion shown by our chairman towards a lady, I can believe anything, even of sharks, even of griffins, even...
Tim Rice's challenge.
A couple of evens.
Yes. I must this time say that...
She actually repeated the repetition. That
I know.
time.
I know she did. Yes.
I just wondered whether you were counting.
No, I'm not counting, actually, Peter. But, Tim Rice, you have the subject, and there are 25 seconds on sharks, starting now.
The shark has been described as the perfect eating machine, because that really is all it does. It grooves around the oceans of this world and...
Peter Jones a challenge.
It must do something else, or there wouldn't still be sharks.
Well, what we do on that occasion, we give Peter Jones a bonus point for a good challenge, because actually Tim wasn't really deviating from the subject. So, Tim, you continue, and there are 16 seconds left on sharks, starting now.
Many very successful films have been made starring sharks because dramatically they have colossal built-in natural tension, and you've only got to put a huge pair of fangs 80 feet high right across the screen, and you are going to scare the pants off.
Libby Purves challenged.
I think he hesitated before scare, but it might have been just fright.
He did. You were just right, because only 1 second to go on sharks. You got in again just before the whistle, starting now.
Americans often get sharks.
So, we now have a situation where Libby Purves is now equal with Kenneth Williams in third place, and he's 2 behind Tim Rice, and he's 5 behind our leader Peter Jones, and Kenneth Williams begins the next round. The subject, Kenneth, frogs. Will you tell us something about those little spawned animals, starting now?
They're very popular in France, and people eat them. They don't do it much in England, because to ask for a frog leg is to mean that one of them has got to be limping around the place, and of course, then you're up against the RSPCA, and naturally. The other thing about frogs is we call them that when we've got one in our throat. We say, oh, a frog's in my throat, or...
Tim Rice challenge.
2 throats.
Yeah. Frog in my throat. 42 seconds for you, Tim, on frogs, starting now.
Sometimes this word has been used to describe the actual inhabitants of France themselves, which I find really rather unnecessarily cruel. Why should we call Frenchmen frogs? I don't know, I hear you cry, and as I don't know either, I will...
Libby Purves, challenge.
Two don't knows.
Yes, I don't know either, and you hear me cry? Never said a word. 29 seconds, Libby, on frogs, starting now.
It is very dangerous indeed to confuse the frog with the toad, because the frog is a wet animal and slimy and green, whereas the toad is water...
Peter Jones, a challenge.
Repetition of toad.
Your toad's not on the card, frog is, I'm afraid, Libby. So, Peter, you're back in again. You're talking on frogs now with 19 seconds, starting now.
One of the most unattractive things about them is that they eat each other. They are cannibals, and if you keep frog spawn in a jar long enough for it to develop legs, and then...
Libby Purves. The idea of the spawn developing legs.
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
Libby, so you have 6 seconds on frogs, starting now.
The toad...
Peter Jones, a challenge.
Hesitation.
You
slow off the mark.
I was breathing.
Yes, well, I gave it against our other guest, Tim Rice, when he paused for 2 seconds. So, Libby, I must do the same to you. You did wait for 2 seconds, so there are 4 seconds for you, Peter, on frogs, starting now.
Actually, the legs, if cooked with a little
Tim
butter...
Rice challenge.
Didn't Peter say legs
No,
before?
it was Kenneth Williams who talked about the legs.
No, he said the spawn grew legs.
No, he talked about the spawn.
Yes, well done.
Yes, the spawn was growing legs.
Yes.
The audience are nodding, you see.
No, I think the chairman's got it quite right. I think he's in...
I think the chairman's got it quite wrong on this occasion,
Oh,
so
right.
I will admit my mistakes when they occur. So, Tim, you have the subject with 3 seconds on frogs, starting now.
I once had a pet frog. I was devoted to this animal. He was named...
So, Tim Rice, one of our guests, is doing very well. He's catching up on our leader, Peter Jones, and Peter begins the next round. The subject, Peter, is throwing custard pies. Will you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
It's a very overrated pastime, I think, and not very funny to watch.
Libby Purves challenge.
Two veries, I think, very overrated, not very funny.
Too. Yes,
Oh,
there are
yes,
two varies,
yes.
Well, listen, Libby. And you have a point and the subject, and there are 54 seconds throwing custard pies, starting now.
Peter Jones is entirely wrong about it being a pastime which is overrated. It is the most exciting and stimulating thing you can possibly do. Imagine us all sitting around here. Kenneth Williams, a pie, splat, Tim Rice.
You can only have one splat. So think of another one. So Peter Jones got in then, and Peter, hesitation, yes, 38 seconds, throwing custard pies, starting now.
The custard is actually not made with milk and eggs, as one would suppose, but usually it's shaving cream, which is very unpleasant to taste if you're on the receiving end of the pie that is being thrown by some other alleged comedian at you in order to make people amused and excited.
And Libby Purves challenged.
He wasn't excited enough. He hesitated.
He certainly wasn't. He was really floundering. I think you actually saved him, really. He was really...
Yes, it wasn't much fun.
Wasn't one of your more inspired moments, no, Peter.
No.
Libby, you've got another point, and the subject back, and 17 seconds throwing custard pies, starting now.
And so the pie leaves my hand once more. Tim Rice. Blech. Then Peter Jones receives the next one, which is full of shaving cream, flavoured with pepper. Flat. And then the chairman...
Peter Jones, a challenge.
Repetition of...
Yes.
It was...
You had splat the first time.
It was splat and then it was blat. These are
Yes.
two entirely different
there were
words,
three altogether.
As Kenneth will agree.
But you repeated the blat, you see. You should have had a different sound for when you hit Peter. So Peter Jones got in with 3 seconds to go on throwing custard pies, starting now.
I threw one on television once.
Tim Rice.
Repetition of through, as opposed to throw on the card.
Yes, you did say through before.
Did I win?
Yes, I don't know, but...
You say through absolute rubbish. He's inventing it. He's relying on your
Actually,
delirium
I was.
tremens.
You know, Mr. Chairman, I was trying to cheat. I admit it. I'm sorry.
What an appalling
There
advertisement.
has never been such a confession on this program. Never. He's made history.
And particularly as he's identified himself as an old pupil of Lancing College. What a shocking advertisement.
Yes. Where the fees are still quite reasonable, he tells us.
They'll go down after this.
Well, Peter, there's 1 second to go. It's the last round. You're way out in the lead. Shall I give it to Tim Rice so that he can finish the show?
Yes,
Because you're going to
give him
win
a second,
anyway.
see what he can
so
do.
in 1 second, because you've been so honest, Tim, would you tell us about throwing custard pies starting now? Well, blow your whistle now, Leonie. And I will have to admit that I was cheating now because I stopped Leonie blowing the whistle to see what Tim would do, and he just paused and nobody challenged, so you still finished up with a point. Let me give you the final score. Kenneth Williams finished in 4th place, only a few points behind Libby Purves, who came halfway through from nowhere to finish in a strong 3rd place just behind Tim Rice, but they were way behind this week's winner, Peter Jones. We hope that you've enjoyed Just a Minute and will want to tune in again. Same time next week when we take the air and we play this delightful and sometimes impossible game. So then, from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Rossiter and produced by Pete Atkin.
We present Kenneth Williams, Derek Nimmo, Clement Freud and John Junkin in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you very much. Hello and welcome once again to Just a Minute. And as you just heard from our announcer, we had 3 of our regular players of the game, and we welcome back, after an absence of a number of weeks, John Junkin to play Just a Minute. As usual, they will try and talk, if they can, on the subject that I give them, and they will try and do it without hesitation or repetition or deviating from the subject. Let us begin the show this week with Derek Nimmo. Derek, the subject is paradise. Will you tell us something about that in the game, starting now?
Ancient historians will say the Bahrain in the Persian or now Arabian Gulf is the most probable site for paradise. It certainly was the home of the ancient Dilmans, the civilization, which spoke a Sumerian tongue of great antiquity. And there are signs amongst the coastal areas of a former great lushness of vegetation. In fact, underneath the date palm groves, you can find remains of a wonderfully verdant jardin. And that could have been paradise. We tend to think probably of paradise as heaven today, something we will seldom find on this earth. And so we look forward to the afterlife. My father's house has many mansions.
Clement Freud's challenge.
Well, verily, I don't.
Well, you were sort of like you
afterlife.
did.
I do think it's a bit much to expect this audience to look forward to the afterlife.
I don't think he was asking them to. He was just
Yes, he
stating that there are people who believe that paradise is the afterlife, and they look forward to
They
that.
don't look
And,
forward to it.
Derek, would you like to drag on this subject a little longer? It is paradise, and there are 7 seconds left starting now.
My idea of paradise is a place without Nicholas Parsons, where I can live in happiness and content the rest of my life.
Derek Nimmo started with the subject, he finished with the subject, and when the whistle goes, that tells us that 60 seconds is up, and whoever speaks in that moment gets the extra point, so Derek Nimmo has 2 and is in the lead. Clement Freud, will you take the next subject, which is the goose? There are 60 seconds, as usual, starting now.
There are many continental countries today which use the goose the way we used to use watchmen or guards. And I suppose the great advantage of it is that when the goose dies, you can eat him, which you are not supposed to do with those human beings who look after your security. A very sensible way of preparing a goose for the table is to pluck it, him, her, depending on the gender of the animal.
John Junkin charged.
Deviation. It's not an animal, it's a bird.
Oh, there's a
You should have
bird.
got him on deviation for sex, because he said the goose depending on his or her, whereas the gander's the male. Goose can only be female. You should have got him on that. You were a fool. You let an
You took
opportunity
the words
go
out of
by.
my mouth, Kenneth.
Yeah, the goose is an animal. I'm
You
sure.
would nobody
John.
denies that. We all know the goose is an animal. You're great.
Well, John Junkin challenged because he said it wasn't an animal, it was a bird. So, Clement, I disagree with the challenge. Another point to you, and 28 seconds, the goose starting now.
In the Falkland Islands, we actually employ, under the Department of the Environment, a goose ecologist whose job it is to look after that species and ensure its well-being throughout the long winter months, which are...
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes, I think that was hesitation, Clement. And there are 13 seconds on the goose. Derek starting now.
Of course, the goose summon is the most tremendous fun, isn't it? You get your hand, you go woo woo like that, and they leap up in the air, and you can go behind unsuspecting old ladies in dark alleys and give them a quick goose, and they don't know what's happened. They think that...
I think they'll have a pretty good idea what's happened to them, actually. Derek, you've increased your lead at the end of that round.
Pity I didn't get round to
Devious
your wife.
thought.
I'd have got round to your wife. Let me wait long now.
Kenneth Williams, your turn to begin. The subject is the Eiffel Tower. 60 seconds starting now.
In a delightful film called When Our Hearts Were Young, the Eiffel Tower was featured, where these 2 young girls went to the top, and then the doors were locked. They couldn't get down, and threw various items of clothing to attract people's attention. And it was very funny indeed, because this tower, the Eiffel, was designed by a man called Gustave Alexandre Eiffel, and it was built in 1897, would you believe, and wasn't completed until 2 years later. It goes up for 1,010 feet. Most of the time people measure it in meters, but I find that very misleading.
Clement Freud is challenged.
Repetition of young.
Young? Young.
In the film When We Were Young and Gay, and these 2 young women.
I
was
see,
a long
you're
time
going
ago.
right back to there.
I thought I'd let him go on a bit. Because it's not really a subject I want to talk about a lot.
He's nonplussed and overwhelmed by the whole thing, but it is a correct challenge. Those are the rules, I'm afraid, Kenneth. 10 seconds for Clement. Eiffel Tower starting now.
Unlike the Tower of Pisa, which leans quite noticeably, Eiffel...
Kenneth Williams.
Deviation. We're not discussing the Tower of Pisa, we're discussing the Eiffel Tower. And I was doing it very competently before you allowed me to be interrupted. And this audience, you will see, is thoroughly agreeing with me.
Oh, I'm sure they'd agree with you, especially in your present mood. They'd be frightened not to. Clement Freud has a point, and there are 5 seconds on the Eiffel Tower starting now.
It is one of the great French tourist attractions, and people from all over the continent...
At the end of that round, Clement Freud, speaking as the whistle went, gained that all-important extra point. He's equal now with Derek Nimmo, and Kenneth Williams and John Junkin are trailing a little. In fact, they've yet to score. But, Derek Nimmo, it's your turn to begin. The subject is canals. Will you tell us something about those in the game starting now?
I've always been terribly interested in canals since I went to Amsterdam as a small boy and had a wonderful holiday on the Prinsengracht. And as I travel throughout the world, I try to find new canals to examine. One of those systems of canals that I've found staying...
John Junkin challenge.
Hesitation.
I would
Yes,
agree,
absolutely
John.
right.
So you have 43 seconds on canals starting now.
It is with profound profound regret that I have to announce the fact that my knowledge of canals is minimal. I am aware that there is a Manchester Ship Canal, which I presume must be somewhere near that town, and there is also a Grand Union Canal. In Aylesbury, which is the market town and the county town of Buckinghamshire, where I was evacuated...
Clement Freud challenge.
Reputation of town.
Yes, county town, market town. Sorry, John, 24 seconds are left for you, Clement, on canals, starting now.
During the war, I worked on the Grand Union Canal, doing the most useful war occupation in which...
John Junkin.
Repetition of war.
No.
During the war.
During the
War
war.
occupation.
During
Yes.
the war occupation.
Yes.
That's right.
Absolutely right.
16 seconds on canals with you, John, starting now.
Canals are artificial waterways, unlike rivers, which are natural and have a source going down usually to the sea.
Derek Nimmo.
Deviation is now talking about rivers, not canals.
I said unlike.
Unlike. No, you were making a comparison, John. You keep the subject 7 seconds, starting now.
The Panama and Suez canals are probably two of the most famous of these edifices in the world.
Derek Nimmo.
A canal cannot be an edifice.
An edifice must go up, I think.
If you stand on the bottom of a canal and look to either side, it will go up.
No, but they dig it down.
They dig it down. If you stand at the bottom, you look up. Which is correct.
They'll say anything to get a point, and you can make an argument in any way round, but I don't think it would be accurate to allow it. Half a second with Derek starting now.
The clones of Bangkok.
Unjust.
It was a good point, John, but I didn't think I could allow it. But you have gained some points. Derek's taken the lead, one ahead of Clement Freud, and John Junkin, your turn to begin. The subject, Jack Horner. Will you tell us something about him in the game, starting now?
Jack Horner, the subject of a childhood nursery rhyme, sat, we are told, in the corner. On what he placed his posterior, history does not record, but Jack Horner did that same thing.
Derek Nimmo,
Hesitation.
I think so,
Thank you.
Derek. 44 seconds are
Quite
left for
right.
Jack Horner with you, starting now.
Hopton, Horner, Smith and Thin, when the abbots went out, he came in. Because what the historical figure of Jack Horner was a man who owned a number of abbeys, sent them to the king, the title deeds in a pie, and he put in his thumb and he pulled out the choicest one, which was an abbey of Mells, in which the family of Horner still live to this very day. Isn't that a fascinating thing? You say this little rhyme. Little Jack Horner sat in the corner eating his Christmas pie. He put in his thumb, he pulled...
John Junkin, Charles.
Repetition of pie and repetition of thumb.
Yes.
Absolutely, yes.
Absolutely, yes. 15 and a half seconds left with you, John, on Jack Horner, starting now.
Historically, Jack Horner did exist, but as far as the children of the world are concerned, he is merely a fictional character in a nursery rhyme.
Clement Freud.
Deviation.
What?
Well, John of China, I've never heard of him.
Oh, you know the
Name 4 who have never heard of him.
I remember being in Las Vegas a couple of years ago, and there were some South American children in the swimming pool at Caesar's Palace singing Ring a Ring a Roses, Pocket Full of Pose. And there was a little rhyme composed during the Great Plague in England and being sung by South American children in Las Vegas. Now I think you're absolutely right.
Thank
Children
you.
of the world.
Maybe
Thank you,
Gladys? Thank you, Derek, for making the point for me. I mean, for all we know, Gladys here, we may have taught it to the Chinese children over there. So, John, we disagree with the challenge. 6 seconds are left on Jack Horner, starting now.
What has not so far been stated is that Jack Horner's recorded words upon producing said plum from said pie...
So John Junkin kept going with that subject, gained a number of points, including one for speaking as the whistle went. He's only 1 point behind Clement Freud, 2 behind our leader Derek Nimmo, and quite a few ahead of Kenneth Williams. Clement, the subject for you is pets that should not be kept in a flat. Will you tell us something on that long subject, starting now?
I didn't live in a flat, but I believe the pets that should not be kept therein are boa constrictors, vipers, leopards, tigers, elephants, rhinoceri, and especially giraffes, who need a maisonette unless the flat has exceedingly high ceilings. Goldfish.
Derek Nimmo. Hesitation, yes. One thing that could be, I suppose. There are 38 seconds, Derek. Pets that should not be kept in a flat, starting now.
Well, one of the pets that I've always wanted to keep in my flat is called a penthouse pet. But my wife has never really quite approved of the idea, so she's always chucked them out. Instead, she tends to have geese. Isn't it funny why she's so fond of goosing? or rather the bird that I mentioned the first time. This is a load of rubbish. Why does somebody challenge me?
John Junkin,
Oh, Poppy, well, we sit here year after year talking absolute rubbish about things we know nothing about. Why do we come
Deviation.
here?
I don't talk a lot of rubbish. I talk absolute common sense. And people are longing to hear me. But no, I can't get a word in because you're going blithering on and then saying it's a load of rubbish.
I quite agree, Kenneth. I hope you feel better.
Yes.
Good. And you may speak rubbish, Derek, but the audience enjoy it. And John Junkin's had a correct challenge, and he has 21 seconds on pets that should not be kept in a flat, John, starting now.
It is the considered opinion of many veterinarian surgeons that no pets...
Clement Freud.
You can't be a veterinarian surgeon. You can be a veterinary surgeon, or you can be a veterinarian. There's deviation.
Veterinarians, surgeons. Do I have to put all the punctuation in as well?
I think when you've got to keep going under the pressure...
I heard the comma here.
Thank you. I like your work, Derek.
Yes. And you are our guest, John, so 18 seconds on pets that should not be kept in a flat starting now.
It is the considered opinion of veterinary...
Clement Freud.
It's the second considered opinion.
What's the second?
Yes, but in a separate entity, I was reiterating
No, you were
what
still...
I said.
I'd like Kenneth Williams to have the subject.
Yes, all right. That's very generous of you, Clement. And Kenneth has the subject of pets that should not be kept in a flat. 14 and a half seconds, starting now.
The hippopotamus springs to mind as being totally unsuitable because inside the hide of hippopotamuses, they're very much the same as us.
Derek Nimmo.
Hippopotami. Deviation.
Yes, it is hippopotami,
No.
but if you want to be correct. But I know some people talk about hippopotamuses, and Kenneth Williams is one of those people, and so he keeps the subject, and he has 6 seconds left, starting now.
Also, platypuses. They should never be kept in the flat because the duck-billed...
Clement Freud.
I think anybody could call a platypus a pet.
He said they should
You
not.
call boa constrictors pets.
I have a son who has a pet boa constrictor. If you have a son
But
who
these
has
are
a
what-
pet
these are pets you should
duck-billed
not keep in a
platypus.
flat.
But nobody challenged you on giraffes and rhinoceri
They should have
and
done.
elephants. I know they should have.
The
but
fact
they
they're
didn't.
not very smart doesn't disqualify me from getting points.
But you see, Kenneth is very smart, and you wanted him to have the subject, so I think it's very
I
generous
want
of you.
it back now. He's had his subject.
All right, with 2 seconds to go, do we give it back to him, Kenneth? Yes. And you continue, Clement, starting now.
White mice are bad.
Well, I'll say this, Clement is the most sporting player of the game. He got it back with 2 seconds to go, so he's now taken the lead, one ahead of Derek Nimmo, who won when they were all, this particular four were together some weeks back. And, Kenneth, it's your turn to begin, and the subject is spring. Will you tell us something about that in the game, starting now?
The best mattress you can get has what's called a box spring. Now then, I went to one of these men that specializes in advice on posture whilst in repose. What a dissertation I was treated to. Because he pointed out to me, you see, that so many people are suffering from back trouble since they are not supported in the way they should be when they are asleep at night and dreaming in the arms of Morpheus. Oh, it makes me feel quite thrilled when I hear that line. So, the springs in your bed should be examined very thoroughly, preferably by an expert bedding man, and then...
Clement Freud.
And preferably when you're not in it.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't mind.
Depends on what kind of bedding man, wouldn't it? Yeah. It's an incorrect challenge. Let's give Clement a bonus point for a good challenge, which we enjoyed. A point to Kenneth for a wrong challenge, and he keeps the subject. 13 seconds, spring, starting now.
One thinks of the burgeoning.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Thinks, repeated thinks. One thinks. and
Yes,
had
you
to
did say
think
one
before.
thinks before. The whole phrase is repeated, so I'm afraid that is Derek Nimmo's correct challenge. 10 and a half seconds, spring, Derek, starting now.
Well, my most favourite springs in the whole wide world is Alice Springs in the Northern Territory of Australia. Gosh, I've been there some 5 times now. Every time I arrive on...
Clement Freud challenge.
deviation, it isn't in the Northern Territories.
It is in the Northern
It's in the
Territory.
Central Territory.
No, there's no such thing as the Central Territory.
He's right, you
Why
know.
don't we ask the audience?
No.
It's a geographical
They look
fact.
very knowledgeable.
Think of the six
There is
states.
no area called the Central
Tasmania,
Territory.
there's Western Australia, there's Southern Australia, there's New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland,
Queensland
and
and
the Northern
Tasmania.
Territory, which is administered by central government and is not self-governing as the others are. It is in the Northern Territory. You go from Adelaide, you stop at a place called Fink, would you believe, and then you arrive at Alice Springs. You go north from Alice Springs, you go to Tennant Creek. That's still in the Northern Territory, and eventually you arrive at Darwin, which they have happily now rebuilt. So, shut up.
You probably realise by now that Derek Nimmo has travelled a bit. Derek, an incorrect challenge, half a second, spring, starting now.
Dale.
Well, now Derek Nimmo has taken the lead, one ahead of Clement Freud, and John Junkin's trailing a little, and Kenneth more than somewhat. And Derek, your turn to begin. The subject is things I want to do in aeroplanes. What a devious subject. Well, it depends on your mind, I suppose. You start now.
The thing I most want to do when I'm in an aeroplane is to land. Because it does give one a keen feeling of reassurance if you are going to touch terra firma once more. I remember when I first started to fly myself, and had just got my license, I flew from a place called Tullamarine out into the, well...
John Junkin challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes, I agree, John. There are 44 seconds on things I want to do in aeroplanes, starting now.
One of the things...
Hesitation. Took him ages to begin.
I always have to apologise for breathing when I'm on this programme.
Kenneth, I would give you the benefit
Thank
of
you
the
very
doubt
much.
on
Well,
this
now, the
occasion.
things I want
No,
to
wait
do
a minute.
there-
42 seconds on what things I want to do in aeroplanes, starting now.
I've always wanted to go up in the Concorde, and nobody's offered me what I would call an honorary or gratis ticket. Now, I should be given one of these. I've waxed eloquent on the subject of this beautiful plane and the magnificence of the design. Can you envisage anything more graceful than that lovely creation touching down in America, because it still does fly there? Unfortunately, of course, the European routes have been greatly restricted because people...
And John Junkin challenged.
I would like to challenge on the grounds of deviation in that he has given us a long talk on, and inaccurate talk on Concorde, and not mentioned any of the things that he would like to do on an aeroplane, which is the subject.
Absolutely right.
What you want to do, I said, is to fly in Concorde. That's what I want to do. That's what I said.
But you can't fly in an aeroplane.
What you're doing in an aeroplane than if you were in Concorde.
You can't fly in an aeroplane in an aeroplane.
I recognise your challenge, John, but I do think he was keeping on the subject, things he wants to do in an aeroplane, and I felt he was
He wants
in
to
there.
fly in Concorde. He can't get on an aeroplane and
The
fly in
things
Concorde.
that fly in Concorde, you great fool, is one of the things I want to do. In an aeroplane, you great nit. Oh, it's ridiculous. I mean, why engage these people if they're non-compass mentis? Just get on and give it to me.
I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt, because I think John did have a very
hurry
good
up.
point.
Let me take a break.
Go off him,
12
go off him.
seconds,
Give it to me.
starting now.
I would like to have a parachute on me, and then...
Clement Freud challenged.
That's not in an airplane. That's
Well,
when
You can have a parachute on you in an aeroplane, you fool.
that's
You
out
put
of
your
an
parachute on in the aeroplane, you don't put it on as you're going down. So he had his parachute in Concorde, and he was on a European route. And he has 8 seconds, starting now.
Then I press a button on the ejector seat. So, the exhaust of the aeroplane catches...
Yes, and quite right, John, absolutely right. He wouldn't have exhaust from the Concorde, but he's still up there. Carry on, Kenneth, starting now.
And I am sucked into these various clean air currents.
So Kenneth Williams came in on that subject, and he only had 1 point when he started, and he now has 9. And he's equal with John Junkin, and only 2 behind Clement Freud and Derek Nimmo. And this time it is John Junkin to begin. John, the subject is drink. Can you talk on that subject in just a minute, starting now?
Drink is something to which I have been driven most frequently in my life by appearances on this particular game. It is a hobby or pastime to some people, to other people it is an illness. To some it is an aversion. However, the different kinds of drink can affect other people in other ways.
Clement Freud is challenged.
Repetition of people.
Yes, I'm afraid so. Clement, you have the
Thank
subject.
you, Clement.
There
I
are
was
40
talking right
seconds
down a blind alley there.
There are
I'm very
40
grateful
seconds
to you.
to go on the subject of drink, starting now.
Beer is generally accepted to be our national drink, and also that of the Germans and the Americans. But there are parts of the country in which the drink is cider, and an excellent beverage that is, as well as having an enormous profitability because of the tax differences which the Chancellor of the Exchequer in his wisdom has sought fit to bestow upon it.
Derek Nimmo,
This has become a party political broadcast. We're certainly talking about drink.
No, I don't think it was any particular party politics came into that comment about, because everybody drinks, and therefore, Clement, I disagree with the challenge. You keep the subject 7 seconds left, starting now.
In Switzerland they give you something called Glühwein, which is pretty disgusting and hot and sweet. But as you get it after you've been...
Well, Clement Freud gained a number of points in that round, and he has now taken the lead ahead of Derek Nimmo. And Clement, it's also your turn to begin. The subject is getting into bed. Will you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
Getting into bed.
Kenneth Williams.
Yes,
I would agree with that. Yes, he hardly got started at all. 2 seconds, and not an utterance.
What's the subject?
Getting into bed.
Oh, thank you.
58 seconds, starting now.
Getting into bed has to be a little trepidatious for me. I'll tell you for why. I have got this trouble, which is my bones, and I was warned to go in on the side and then inch my way round, because, you see, the stomach tends to go round to the side, if I'm not very careful.
John Junkin challenged.
Apart from being incapable of standing
Why
much
don't you
more of this
stop for all this
macabre
today?
word picture, the word round was repeated twice.
Yes, I'm afraid so. There are 31 seconds on getting into bed, starting now.
Getting into bed is something which I do with great pleasure, even if it is my own. I always approach this in the same way by very carefully lowering the top sheet, blanket and bed cover, then putting one foot gently, gingerly on the bottom sheet and testing...
Derek Nimmo.
Repetition of sheet.
There are 9 seconds for getting into bed with you, Derek, starting now.
I once went to the most beautiful bed that I've ever seen in the whole of my life. It was situated outside Kuala Lumpur and belonged to a princess.
So Derek Nimmo, speaking as the whistle went, gained the extra point and not only brought the round to an end, but also the show to an end. And I will now give you the final score. They all four scored a great number of points. John Junkin, our guest, finished up in 4th place, only 2 points behind Kenneth Williams, who was in 3rd place. He was only 2 points behind Derek Nimmo, who was in 2nd place, and he also was only 2 points behind this week's winner, Clement Freud. We do hope you've enjoyed the game, and wherever you listen and however you listen, you will want to tune in when we take to the airwaves and play this game once again. Till then, goodbye from us all.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by Pete Atkin.
We present Kenneth Williams, Clement Freud, Peter Jones, and Victoria Wood in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you very much. Hello and welcome once again to Just a Minute. And this week, as you've just heard, we have 3 of our regular players of the game, and we welcome back Victoria Wood once more to do battle in just a minute. Welcome, Victoria. I hope you've had a good journey from Morecambe this time.
Yes, thank you, marvellous.
We're going to begin the show with Peter Jones, but before I do that, let me remind you that I'm going to ask them to speak, if they can, on the subject that I give them, and try and do it without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from the subject. Peter, this week, fun on the trampoline is the first subject. We'd like you to take it because we think it suits you extraordinarily well. As usual, there are 60 seconds, and you begin now.
Well, I used to think that the most fun I ever had was on a waterbed, but then I'd never been on a trampoline. And I'm here to tell you that it is one of the most sensational experiences that you can have, bouncing up and down on this canvas thing with the springs around it, and holding on occasionally to one of the posts at the corner and going round it, making a sort of loop-the-loop effect.
Clement Freud challenge.
Repetition of loop, I'm afraid.
The loop. Yes. What a pity. But Clement Freud, do you have a correct challenge? You get a point for that, of course, and you take over the subject of fun on the trampoline, and there are 34 seconds left, starting now.
Fun on the trampoline is not illegal among consenting adults on designated days of the year, and I won't have anyone saying that it is, because for sheer harmless pleasure, there is nothing like it. I had a friend called Sebastian Wickerstaff, whose trampoline manners were a joy to behold. Up he went, then down, sideways, lengthways, and then along came someone quite different. Would you like my trampoline, he said. Just a small go at it, say 25 minutes.
Fine example of how you can talk absolute rubbish for 30 seconds in just a minute and still keep going and not be guilty of the crimes within the game. Clement Freud gained a point for speaking as the whistle went, which tells us that 60 seconds is up. The laughter is because Kenneth Williams is adjusting his golden locks, and at the end of the first round, Clement Freud is the only one to score. Clement, will you begin the second round, because we've got this subject for you. It's bathing the dog. And we thought it was really up your street, so would you tell us something about it in the game starting now?
Bathing the dog should only be attempted if the end product you have in mind is either a clean dog, a wet dog, or a dead dog. And for the latter, I suggest that you hold him down for not less than 3 minutes.
Victoria Wood challenge.
Deviation, telling you how to kill dogs, not bath them.
Right.
I think he established that the dog was dead, but I think it's very devious to bath a dead dog. So on that basis, I would give it to you, Victoria, and tell you that you have 44 seconds on bathing the dog, starting now.
The way to do it is to buy a dog and wait for it to get dirty, and then bath it. And the thing to do next is to tie it up to the hall stand or lock it in the kitchen while you prepare the running hot and cold water, which you are going to pour into a receptacle such as a washing up bowl or a sink or just a hole in the floor, depending on what you want to do. Grab the dog, push him into the water, get your cake of soap.
Clement Freud challenge.
Or her.
What? Or her what?
Push him or her.
Are you writing my script?
What about it?
Thought she'd like another point.
There are 20 seconds left for you to continue on bathing the dog, Victoria, starting now.
Peter
Jones a challenge.
Well, I don't know whether this challenge is exciting enough, but
it's not.
It's hesitation.
Yes, this time you really didn't get going.
I give in.
But you definitely paused.
Yeah.
Peter Jones, you have the subject of bathing the dog, and there are 19 seconds left, starting now.
Get in the bath with the dog. Take all your clothes off, and this will allay the dog's fears. It'll put it at its ease, and you will end up as clean as the dog, providing you have plenty of soap suds and warm water. Then get near the hand.
Well, Peter Jones got that all-important extra point for speaking as the whistle went, and at the end of that round, he's in a strong lead with twice as many points as Victoria Wood and Clement Freud. And Kenneth Williams, will you begin the next round? The subject, duelling. Will you tell us something about that in the game, starting now?
Well, these gentlemen got together to settle their differences, do you see, with swords. And the idea was that honour had been impugned, and they could only be satisfied by physically indulging in this rapier or horsemanship or whatever you like to call it. No, it's not horseman, although you could have...
Clement Freud challenged.
There's repetition of horsemen.
Well, some of them did do it on horses, actually. Yeah. They did it, and when they said walk backwards, the horse had to walk backwards instead of the men, you see. That's the whole point of it.
And the men stayed still, did they?
That's right. Brilliant. I don't know why I said horsemanship. It was weird.
Yes. I think you were thinking of jousting, weren't you? Anyway, there are 36 seconds on duelling with you, Clement, starting now.
Duelling is something you should never try to do on your own because it has harmful consequences. Two people at very least are required, although sometimes they have seconds or servants who hold their swords, rapiers, or whatever...
Kenneth Williams.
Sometimes they have seconds, implying that they're actually doing it today. Nobody is doing it today, so it's deviation.
No, when they do it, sometimes...
Nobody does it today. It's against the law, you great fool.
He didn't establish, Kenneth. He didn't establish that they were still doing it. He just said when they do it. No, I don't think he was deviating from the subject. Clement, you continue with 22 seconds on duelling, starting now.
Dawn was always considered a good time of day for this pastime because few people were around and no one was about to alert the police because for many years now this has been a totally illegal practice, becoming ever more so as time went on and the nation became increasingly educated as to the harmful nature.
So Clement Freud gained a lot of points on that round and has taken the lead ahead of Peter Jones and Victoria Wood. Will you begin the next round? The subject is Wickedness I Enjoy. Can you reveal something about yourself in just a minute as you take that subject for 60 seconds, starting now?
I can't enjoy things if they're very wicked because they make me feel guilty, but one tiny practice I do have which makes me feel not particularly bad, and it is a little tiny bit wicked. I think I've said so many words twice, nobody seems to be listening. I think I'll just carry on talking. One thing is to spend lots of money on things that I don't really need, like leg warmers and bars of chocolate, and to eat them or wear those things in private. I just stopped because I can't think of anything else to say.
And Kenneth Williams' challenge.
Deviation, I'm sure she can think of a lot of things to say.
I think the idea of her wearing a bar of chocolate was what fascinated me. And eating a leg warmer. Kenneth, you have 32 seconds on Wickedness I Enjoy, starting now.
Yes, I'll tell you what it is. It's putting down a load of bores. Dreary old... I was thinking, you see, of a rude word. That was the point. I couldn't actually say it.
You actually, I thought you were going to repeat it. That's funny that they...
Who challenged me, Nick?
Peter Jones.
Oh.
Peter, we're going to hear from you on this subject now. There are 25 seconds left. Wickedness I Enjoy.
Well, real wickedness I enjoy at one remove, when it's personified by someone like Sidney Greenstreet or Peter Lorre, or one of those real old-fashioned villains in films, which were thrillers or detective stories sometimes, and they would be playing the parts of criminals who were up to the most vicious and unpleasant tricks, and were in the end, of course, caught and punished.
So Peter Jones kept going on the subject until the whistle went. He gained an extra point for that and has gone back into the lead, one ahead of Clement Freud. And the subject for him to start the next round is Escaping from a Maze. Will you tell us something about that in just a minute, Clement, starting now?
Maze is the generic word for what we call sweet corn. And if you escape...
Victoria?
It's not. It's a different word.
No, I think that's right.
Maze has got an I in it. You can't escape
I know,
from
but
a
it's not her spelling. I mean, it's
Isn't
what...
it?
No, it's how the word sounds, whether it's maze that you eat, or the maze in which you can go round like the one
You
at
can't
Hampton
have
Court.
a maze.
And then there's a maze, yes.
No, not am. I don't.
This
mean
is
that.
radio. It's how it sounds on
Yes,
the
it
ear.
is. Look, let Peter speak on my behalf.
It's like saying a wheat.
Yes, you can't escape from a wheat.
I agree with your challenge,
Yes.
whatever it was.
Yes.
And there are 55 seconds for escaping from a maze, starting now.
Escaping from a maze is something that everybody must do. Otherwise, these mazes would be littered with dead bodies of people who hadn't managed to do it. And nobody would pay to go in and drop dead in between two bits of privet, would they?
Clement Cross.
Repetition of dead.
Yes, dead bodies and drop dead.
Yes,
Yes,
quite.
I hope Kenneth can get in on this because corn is his subject.
Oh, dear me. The ruder they get, the more you applaud in just a minute, honestly. Scott, that's okay. So, Clement, you have a correct challenge, and there are 44 seconds on escaping from a maze, starting now.
There used to be in the peerage one Lord Mays, who was the director of Stag Reductions Limited, and I've always...
We've already established you can't do this. Maze. It's escaping from Maze. You can't be Smith. It's ridiculous.
He was going to try and escape from Lord Mays, I'm sure.
Well, that wouldn't be
I do think he hadn't established that he wasn't escaping from this Lord Mays, so I will give you the benefit of the doubt and ask you to talk on this corny subject with 37 seconds left, starting now.
It's quite easy to escape from Maze because you have to walk in. First place, holding a cotton reel, and you unwind it as you go around, you see, and therefore you can just re-thread your way out of it. It's amazing to me that nobody's ever thought of this before. I go around saying to people, have you got...
Victoria Wood challenge.
People have thought of it before.
Yes.
The Greeks did.
Yes, actually, he did say quite definitely it's amazing that people haven't thought of it before.
Yes.
And I'm sure that somebody has thought of it before.
Oh, they have.
So I think that's a very clever challenge,
Yes.
and we give you the subject, Victoria.
The man and the Minotaur. The man who went
I
in
think
after
a lot
the
of
Minotaur.
people. I mean, I think the Greeks were probably the most recent people who thought of it.
14 seconds for Victoria Wood to take Escaping from a Maze, starting now.
Escaping from a maze is quite simple if you just purchase on the entrance a route map or plan with which you can follow your way to the centre and a reasonable method of making an exit from this place.
So Victoria Wood gained points in that round, including one for speaking as the whistle went, and she's now in second place. She's one ahead of Peter Jones, she's 3 behind Clement Freud, and Victoria Wood, you begin the next round. The subject is My Secret. Will you tell us something about that in the game, starting now?
My secret isn't really anything I can reveal to the 6 of us here this evening, not including the audience, because if I told any of you, then it would cease to be a secret, and so I can't really say any more about it than that, except it's awfully private, and it happened a long time ago, and I really think I should stop talking, because I just did an enormous hesitation to give myself up.
Peter Jones is challenged.
Well, this was just a kind of euthanasia on my part to kind of save her from lingering on. She seemed to...
Are you trying to say that she paused?
Yes, I think
I think
am,
so,
yes.
yes.
That's the word I was groping for.
Right. Well, we don't want too much groping in the game, Peter. And you had the subject of My Secret, and there are 38 seconds left, starting now.
My secret will die with me. Nothing will ever persuade me to describe...
Victoria Wood is challenged.
Repetition of me. My secret will die with me, and something else he said.
Well, you've already given up the subject. Why do you want it back?
I just want another point. I don't want it back.
Right.
I just want the point, and somebody else can talk.
When you challenge, you get the subject if
I
you
don't
win.
want
the
it.
Well, you have the
you've got
subject back, and there are
Yes.
31 seconds, Victoria. My Secret, starting now.
My secret happened to me on a wet Wednesday in December 1972, and I cannot tell you any more about it because it's a secret.
Clement Freud challenged.
Repetition if I can't tell you.
Yes, you said before, I can't tell you.
I told you I didn't want it back.
Yeah. Clement Freud, there are 22 seconds. My Secret, starting now.
I want to tell you all about my secret, because I shall feel much better as a result. It was on Tuesday, the 15th of September, 1942, and it happened in Walberswick in Suffolk, where I then lived. A man came up to me as the sun was setting over the Anchor Inn.
Just before the whistle went, Kenneth Williams, your light came on. What is
Yes,
it?
of course it came on before he'd finished, because he was just filling in. He'd no intention of telling any secret. It was a load of codswallop about Walberswick and the setting sun. I'd never heard such a load of rubbish in my life.
And you've done the same to him. You've got him with 1/5 of a second
Oh,
to go.
good, yes, good. So have I got the subject?
Yes, my
yes,
secret.
Right.
Starting now.
Yes, well, I'd like to say... Oh, good, I won the point. That means I'm in the lead now, doesn't it? What have I got?
4 points.
Yes, who's in the lead then?
Clement Freud. You're actually still in 4th place. Only a little way behind Peter Jones and Victoria Wood. Clement Freud is actually quite a strong lead. And Peter, will you begin the next round? The subject is lime. Will you tell us something about that?
Of quite the best cocktail to drink in a tropical atmosphere, the daiquiri. Captain Cook.
Kenneth Williams.
Hesitation.
Yes.
Hesitation, I said.
Yes, I know, I agree.
Well, hurry up, then give me the subject.
He was trying to get out to
Oh, let's get on. Come along.
All right, you're impatient. Right. There are 47 seconds on a lime starting now.
I was told that the bird's excreta contains this substance, and that therefore you could get it on your head if you weren't very careful. Now then, I also happen to know that it's in cement, because when this whiteness appears on brickwork, they always say that is an example of its excrescence. And I know a couple who took this house unaware of any such defect until they called in this surveyor. And he said, well, it's the limes, you see. That's what causes it. Oh, they said, have we any compensation in law? Can we go back and demand that this thing be put right? Alas, he said, no, because it's organic and chemical all...
So Kenneth Williams did terribly well in that round,
God,
getting points, and he got 1 for speaking as the whistle went, but he's still in 4th place. But he's creeping up on the others, and Clement Freud's still in the lead. He also begins the next round, and the subject is honey. Tell us something about that in just a minute, if you can, Clement, starting now.
Honey is a substance much beloved by bears, and I've never quite understood why. But if you hear a story about, say, the 3 bear, or the plural of that word.
Peter Jones' challenge.
Well, he did repeat bears.
No, he said the 3 bear.
Well, then he's all right. Then it's ungrammatical, so it's deviation.
You challenged him for ungrammatical for the story of the 3 bear.
Oh, well, I naturally assumed he wouldn't say 3 bear, you know, because I couldn't hear the end.
No.
But I assumed he'd... well, what do you think?
I think you should have the subject, actually, because... I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, and because you didn't actually hear him, he was very quiet. There are 47 seconds on honey, Peter, starting now.
Some of the best honey in Cornwall is made by the bees.
Kenneth Williams, a chance.
No, rubbish.
You said is made by the bees, so that's hesitation.
No, you did actually hesitate, Peter. You did,
I said
You didn't say but you hesitated.
Well, he said I did say
I know, it doesn't matter what he said. You hesitated. That was the challenge. The challenge was correct.
Are you challenging, Nicholas?
No, I'm trying to keep order in an impossible situation. It's very hot here, and you're getting rather tense and rather...
I'm not tense.
There are 43 seconds for the subject of honey starting now.
One of the most important occupants of which is the Queen. And in the Apiary Journal, a writer complained, he said, when my Queen's... Plural, you idiot.
He was a bit too sharp there, yes. He was
fell right
hoping
into it, didn't he? Yes. The hoist with their own petard, these fools.
Yes, but be fair. You set him up to put him right into it.
Well, that's as may be, darling.
Another point to you, Kenneth, and 33 seconds on honey starting now.
Are delivered by the railroad. They are flung off the train at enormous speed and become stunned. When they get in the hive...
Victoria Wood challenge.
This is deviation. Nothing to do with honey.
I don't know what he was being thrown off the plane getting stunned.
I said the queens the man had delivered for his hive were thrown off the train at high speed and were concussed.
That's not honey.
Well, you're talking about bees and not about honey.
This is the correspondence in the Apiary Journal, which is about bees, if you're looking at the Apiary Journal.
Yeah, but the subject is honey, not bees. The
subject is Apiary is about bees, you fool.
You're supposed to be talking about honey.
Well, they make blooming honey, you great man.
We all know that, I hope, but you have to stick to the subject of honey.
Rubbish. If it was milk, you could talk about cows.
But you would still have to relate it to milk. You could talk about cows and relate it to the cud or grass, but you have to relate it to milk. If you use bees, you must relate it to honey, and you've gone long enough without relating it to honey, so Victoria Wood has a correct challenge. And she has 19 seconds on honey, starting now.
Honey is made by bees who flit from blossom to flower and lick the middle or calyx of the bloom and put all the pollen. When I say pollen, I mean pollen. That was
yes.
the mistake.
10 seconds on honey, Clement, starting now.
Kenneth Williams reliably informs me that bees make honey, and I'm in no position to argue about this whatsoever. I think he's right.
Well, Clement Freud is still in the lead, but he's being well challenged and closely challenged by Kenneth Williams, who has leapt forward into second place alongside Victoria Wood. But, Kenneth, will you begin the next round? The subject, friendship. Will you tell us something about that in the game, starting now?
There is one of the most noble aspects of friendship discussed by Tennyson in that remarkable testimony of probably one of the greatest friendships ever known, which exists.
Peter Jones Chant.
Repetition of greatest.
I'm afraid you did say greatest before.
I didn't.
Did I say greatest twice? Touch a row. What are you doing? He's wearing a decade anyway. What is he?
Peter Jones, yes, I'm afraid you picked you up.
Him again, I suppose, droning on and on.
43 seconds, Peter, on friendship, starting now.
Well, friendship is one of the most priceless possessions a man can have.
And
my feeling... He interrupted.
I know he did. Keep going.
I was going to say that mine for him is something that really sustains me spiritually throughout a difficult life, and always has. His remarkable courage.
Clement Freud challenge.
Deviation.
Why?
Jones has had a very easy life.
Not at all.
Well, as none of us wish to go into his past, and we can only suppose, and I'm sure that anybody in show business has a difficult life.
You can say that again,
Not in this game.
And he has a difficult time in this game. If that's not difficult, therefore he's highly justified in what he said. And there are 22 seconds for you to continue, Peter, on friendship, starting now.
Despite his unfortunate appearance and the unhappy disposition that he has borne like a real hero, because I know he is the subject of many conflicts. His mind is often twisted and warped. But despite this...
Victoria Wood challenged.
I'm feeling sorry for Kenneth. I don't wish Peter to go on.
I know he was going off about Kenneth Williams and less about friendship. It's again like the honey and the bees. He was not relating it. So therefore it's deviation. And you get in with 4 seconds to go on the subject of friendship. Kenneth Williams, for that laugh, was demonstrating friendship with Clement Freud in a very intimate way. But thank goodness we haven't got television, otherwise it would be censored. And 4 seconds. Kenneth.
Yes, we're
It's all right for this to
We're hanging on your every word.
Well,
go on, darling. We're hanging on your every word.
If you're hanging...
Why are you going red? Why has he gone red? Look, he's gone red.
Because I feel you should adjust yourself. It's all very well having this invited, depraved audience in to listen to Just a Minute. But we're not on television, and so therefore we have to try and keep going, in spite of all the difficulties you present us with. And Peter Jones has Victoria Wood. Yes, it's you, our guest. Victoria Wood has 4 seconds to talk on friendship, starting now.
Friendship is a meeting of two minds of like temperament.
Well, that final whistle not only brought that round to an end, it also has brought the show to an end. And we had a situation where our lovely guest Victoria Wood came along, did extremely well, and finished up in second place alongside Peter Jones, and also in the company with Kenneth Williams, 3 second-place people, just a few points behind this week's winner, once again, Clement Freud. We hope that you have enjoyed listening to Just a Minute and will want to tune again, same time next week. Till then, from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by Pete Atkin.
Present Kenneth Williams, Peter Jones, Tim Rice and Libby Purves in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you very much. Hello and welcome once again to Just a Minute. And as you've just heard, we welcome back 2 guests who were with us a few weeks ago. We had quite a different audience in the studio then. And they've come to join 2 of our regulars, Kenneth Williams and Peter Jones. So let's welcome back Tim Rice and Libby Purves. And as usual, they're going to try and speak at different times, we hope, on the subject that I give them, and they're going to try and do that without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from that subject. We'll begin the show this week with Peter Jones. Peter, the subject is plankton. Will you tell us something about that in the game, starting now?
Could be a tremendous source of energy and food for the human race. Grills, I think, are a superior form of plankton, and they keep whales alive.
Tim Rice challenged.
Definite hesitation.
Yes, there was an there which we interpret as a definite hesitation. So, Tim, you have a correct challenge. You get a point for that, and you take over the subject of plankton, and there are 47 seconds left, starting now.
First time I heard this word was when somebody said to me when I was walking down the street, "You great plankton." I had no idea what they actually meant, but I gathered this was not a complimentary term. No, indeed it was not, because the we...
Libby Purves challenged.
2 was nots.
Yes, there were 2 was-nots. Was and not might be 2. So, Libby, you have a correct challenge, and there are 35 seconds for you to take over the subject of plankton, starting now.
Euphemius Jeremiah Plankton of Nottingdale is one of our foremost British painters. Art critics, faced with a wall full of canvases, will say unerringly, "That's a plankton." They will say, "Not a plankton," to another picture. To yet another, they will say...
Tim Rice, a challenge.
Well, there was repetition and deviation because the whole thing is a pack of lies from start to finish. There was also repetition in there.
Prove it.
And the fact that she wasn't challenged before made her hesitate, I think. So
I was longing for somebody to challenge me.
You were daring them to, and eventually they did. It was Tim Rice, one of our guests. And Tim, there are 19 seconds left for you to take back the subject of plankton, starting now.
Frankly, I don't go a bundle on plankton. I think they're pretty stupid animals. They haven't contributed a great deal to mankind's quest for superior knowledge. They've never achieved anything at all in the world of the arts.
Libby Purves challenged.
They have. Plankton achieved enormous things in the role of the arts. As a watercolourist, he was one of the leading spirits of the 19th century. How he can sit there saying that Plankton achieved nothing?
I think he had established he was talking about the animals. It was a clever challenge.
Animals, of course, really.
I know, that was why I thought someone might challenge on, because they're not rated as animals. But harsh. You've just come out with information. Why didn't you challenge on that before, Peter?
Well, too late now.
Yes.
I don't like parading my superior knowledge.
I don't know what's inhibited you all of a sudden. Tim, you had an incorrect challenge and you have 9 seconds to continue on plankton, starting now.
There again, plankton could be quite useful as fodder for other living things on this planet. Krill, which I believe...
Peter Jones challenge.
He talked about the planet before. Repetition of planet.
No, I think we talked about plankton before, not planet.
No, planet. He's on this planet he was talking about.
Of all the living creatures on this planet, you're quite right. That was his phrase at the beginning. Right, well done, Peter. 4 seconds on plankton with you, starting now.
Get as much of it as you can and give it to a whale, as I said.
This week, once again, I am very fortunate in sitting in the chair of Just a Minute because I have the lovely Leonie, who is the secretary, our producer, and she's come along with all her charm and feminine grace to not only blow the whistle, but sit there with a pair of hideous-looking headphones on, and when she does that, it tells us that 60 seconds is up. And whoever is speaking at that particular moment gains an extra point, and it was Peter Jones, and he is equal in the lead with Tim Rice at the end of the first round. Kenneth, will you begin the next round? The subject is memorable sunsets. Will you tell us something about those in the game, starting now?
This, alas, is what plankton will never see. They're under the water, and you must be above it to witness that lovely sight of a setting sun when you're on the luxury cruise, leaning over the ship's rail, perhaps with a glass of martini cocktail in your hand, then getting close to the one you adore and whisper, "Oh, look at that blood-red sunset. Don't it get you going? Don't the adrenaline start?"
Libby.
What's she on about? Grammar again?
Yeah. I must explain to our listeners that last remark, because when Libby Purves was a guest a few weeks back, she mentioned something about Kenneth's grammar and challenged on that. So, but what is your challenge this time?
I wasn't challenging him, I just wanted to ask him to marry me.
Well, as she's already spoken for.
Well, I know she has a baby, so I don't quite know what to... So you just...
I just came overexcited at Kenneth's description, my hand on the trigger. Just...
It was the sort of Freudian slip, and Clement Freud on the programme. And Kenneth, well, it's a bonus for you. She challenged, she interrupted you, so you get a point for that. And you continue on memorable sunsets with 22 seconds left, starting now.
They have been painted, of course, by Turner, but the most memorable for me is Sunset over Godalming by Wright. Now, he's not so well known as you might think he should be, because after all, he's done an awful lot down on the Kent and Sussex coast, and some of those watercolours are very charming. You know, I've often wondered why we don't invest more in them things. They'll fetch a fortune like my old uncle.
So Kenneth Williams started with the subject and finished with it in spite of being interrupted, so he has 2 points at the end of that round. I'm afraid he's still behind our leaders, Peter Jones and Tim Rice. And Tim, you begin the next round. The subject is moving house. Can you tell us something about that horrendous undertaking in the game, starting now?
If you live on the San Andreas Fault, you are quite likely to have a moving house. And the people in California are extremely worried about the prospect of their homes, their livelihoods, their families, their cats dogs, goldfishes, and all their possessions being swept away by nature, which, of course, is a much more powerful force than mere man. And, frankly, if I lived anywhere in that part of the world, I would leg it pretty quickly to somewhere safer, like the Gobi Desert or the Kalahari Desert. But
Libby Purves challenge.
2 deserts. The Gobi Desert and the Kalahari Desert.
Yes.
Oh.
Well, listen, Libby, you have the subject of moving house, and there are 31 seconds left, starting now.
You have to move house sometimes because you get so much...
Kenneth Williams challenge.
You don't have to move house at all. A snail never moves.
I was explaining.
A snail takes his house with him everywhere, don't he? I mean, never moves house at all.
Give me time.
He does move his house, though, doesn't he?
He never moves house.
Moving house, he's moving his house along with him.
That's clever. I get your point. Yes. Not just a pretty face, is it?
Libby, you have the subject still, and there are 28 seconds on moving house, starting now.
I must sometimes...
Hesitation. It's ages before she starts.
I know, 1 second, but she's our lady guest, and...
lady guest. I thought women's lib meant we were all equal.
Well, we are, but some are less equal than others.
Okay.
And on Just a Minute, we have a little sort of courtesy and chivalry to those who have not played it quite so often and happen to be of the feminine gender. And also have just got a baby as well. So, Libby, you have moving house still, and 26 seconds starting now.
When I move house, it is generally because there is so much mess in the old one that I have no alternative but to move to a new one.
Tim Rice.
Well, there were a couple of ones, and I know one's a small word, but it was a very important one.
It was very definite...
He said there 5 times
well,
in
you
succession,
should have challenged.
and I didn't challenge because I knew you wouldn't have allowed it.
Oh, yes, I would. For 5 there's in quick succession. There.
Are you trying to comfort me?
Which he did. Yes,
I didn't do that, did I?
Yes, you did. You said their thing, and their something, and their something, and their house, and their home, and their thing, and their there.
And she does have a baby.
It's becoming the most famous baby on radio. Libby, I'm afraid I agree with Tim's challenge, and he has a point. The subject, 18 seconds, moving house, starting now.
I have only moved house a few times in my career. I remember once packing up all my belongings from my childhood home with...
Libby Purves challenge.
He said my 3 times. My house, my belongings, and my career.
My.
There.
All right, well, it is a correct challenge, and there are 12 seconds... yes, that's right, 12 seconds, starting now.
You put everything that you own into tea chests, large ones and small tea chests.
Kenneth Williams.
Well, it's ludicrous, everything you own. I mean, where's your bed going in a tea chest? Nice mattress in a tea chest.
Kenneth, you have the subject of moving house.
Quite right. I've got the subject, yeah.
And there are 6 seconds starting now.
One thing you must do is get your tissue paper round your Waterford crystal, because they do tend to mess it about.
Well, everybody's very close at the end of that round, and Libby
I've
Morris...
gone into the lead with that last one, because I'll have got the extra points, you see, for speaking. You
As
understand
the
my
whistle
point?
went, yes, and you are in second place.
Oh, good. I've moved right up, you see. It's all happening.
Alongside Tim Rice.
Yes?
And 1 ahead of Peter Jones.
Yes?
And 1 behind our leader, who is at this particular moment Libby Purves.
Oh.
And Libby begins the next round. The subject is getting booked. Will you tell us something about that in the game, Libby, starting now?
Listeners may have been wondering how it is that people get booked for just a minute. I can tell you, getting booked for just...
Tim Rice challenge.
Just.
Yes. We will
I was
never
going to
hear
say
from
getting
Libby.
booked for justice' sake.
Well, in that case, hesitation, because she just said just.
She said just and paused, and no, you were correct. She twisted it beautifully and magnificently. But, Tim, you have the subject on 52.5 seconds, getting booked, starting now.
I think it's very unfair the way that some policemen these days steam around in unmarked cars, giving...
Libby Purves challenge.
There aren't any steam police cars left in England, are there?
What did you say, steam?
There aren't any. He said policemen steam around in cars. I'm just interested because I haven't seen any steam police cars for years now.
I think he was using the phrase, Floki, when you go around very fast, you talk about steaming around.
But steam cars would go slower.
No, Libby, you're not going to get me on that. It wasn't run by steam. The car was steaming around, and it wasn't letting off clouds of steam. It was
radio, you see. This is steam radio. There's no steam. Is there?
Well tried, but, Tim, you keep the subject, and 47 seconds getting booked starting now.
Because when these policemen drive around with...
Peter Jones.
Well, repetition of policeman.
Yes, I'm afraid that's what happens when you stop and start again. One of the words comes back. 45 seconds, Peter, getting booked starting now.
Well, a warden in Sloane Square said to me that she'd booked Shirley Bassey 3 times, and she gave me a list of celebrities. She seemed not interested in anybody else, including me. And she was going on about this, saying it was a collection. It was her hobby, in other words, really, booking these people who had left cars, some of them very expensive and elaborate cars, in...
Libby Purves challenge.
2 cars?
2 cars,
Oh,
yes, Libby. 21 seconds for you on getting booked starting now.
When they wish you to appear on this programme, they phone you up and say, "Oi, doing anything Wednesday, darling?" To which you reply...
Tim Rice challenged.
Nobody said that to me.
Well, they would be afraid of the reaction if they had.
I'm saying you, meaning one, meaning me.
Now, I'll tell you what we'd do, though it's probably deviating in the sense that she wasn't deviating the subject, she was making a very good story. Yours was such a delightful challenge. We give you a bonus point for that, but leave the subject with Libby, getting booked, starting... Oh, how many seconds for you? 13 seconds starting now.
The way to avoid getting booked by a traffic warden is very simple. I adopt the method as follows. Do not drive a car. Refrain even from owning any such vehicle, and then you will...
So, Libby Purves was then speaking as the whistle went, gained that all-important extra point, and is still in the lead, 1 ahead of Tim Rice now. So our 2 guests are out ahead of our 2 regulars. Peter Jones begins the next round, and the subject is My Last Train Set. Will you tell us something... You tell us something about that in the game, starting now.
Well, I haven't yet possessed it. I'm looking forward to getting my last train set. It'll be quite elaborate. I shall have a maze of railway lines all over the floor, and I shall be drunk with power in charge of all these trains.
Kenneth Williams.
All over the floor, all over these trains. All.
Yes, the word to all.
To all.
Yes, to all. Yes. So anyway, it was a correct challenge, so there are 42 seconds for you, Kenneth, to talk on My Last Train Set, starting now.
My last train set had one of the engines with LMS written on it, and my father worked for that great company and called it the L of a mess. And were very difficult to negotiate, unlike the GWR.
Right, so Kenneth Williams, speaking as the whistle went, gained another extra point, and he's now equal with Tim Rice in second place, 1 behind Libby Purves, who's in the lead, and Peter Jones in fourth place. Kenneth, your turn to begin. Polybius is the subject, and can you tell us something about it in the game, starting now?
Well, he was one of 1,000 Achaean nobles taken prisoner by the Romans during the great conquest of Macedonia. Now, he found his way to Rome, and there, instead of captivity, he was befriended by this charming fella called Scipio. One of the great patrician families had him as their heir, you see. So off they went together on various campaigns, one of which was Carthage. Well, he wrote voluminously about this, and there were 47 historical accounts by Polybius. Now then, none of them exist to this day. Now, how is that? Well, you might say, why can't we read these nice books now? They've all gone. They're derelict, you see, and nothing remains. Like Plato, he said a lot of his stuff isn't stayed with us. And Aristotle, you might say the same thing about him. Where's stuff?
Deviation.
Peter, you've had the temerity to challenge. Why?
Well, it's deviation. He was talking about Aristotle.
I never thought that anybody would get an audience in hysteria on the subject of Polybius. That's genius. What was your challenge, Peter?
I just said it was deviating. Talking about Aristotle and all that.
I know, but he was comparing them with Polybius.
With who?
It's the laugh every time you mention it. It's going to be called the Polybius show.
Poly, you see, as in polytheon, many. Poly is many. Polytechnic, many learnings taught here. And poly means many. And Bius is gift, and means many gifted. You see, we'd say now, Mr. Giftful, I suppose, or Mr. Giftsome. There is a Mr. Well.
I don't think I'd ever say Mr. Giftsome or Mr. Giftful, but...
Wouldn't you?
No, I think it's a new word you coined. But they love you talking about Polybius, so you're going to continue for another 8 seconds.
You mean you don't accept his challenge?
No, it's with you, starting now.
Well, he's 210 BC, which is an interesting period for Roman historians, because we must remember...
Libby Purves challenge.
He said Roman before.
Yes, he said Rome before, but this was Roman, he said that time.
I think he said
No,
Roman
I said the Roman
before.
invasion, I must admit. It was the Roman invasion of Macedonia, and I do admit that, yes. And we'll see what Libby Purves, how eloquent she can be on Polybius.
Well, it won't be much of a challenge for her, because she only got 1 second in which to talk on this subject.
Well, that'll probably about exhaust her knowledge of it.
Wait and see.
Libby, you have 1 second starting now.
He wore a green trilby.
So, in spite of Kenneth's erudition and entertainment in that round, he's still in second place behind Libby Purves. He's just ahead of Tim Rice and a little way ahead of Peter Jones, and Tim begins the next round, and the subject, Tim, is a sure laugh. Will you tell us something on that subject in the game, starting now?
Best way I know to guarantee a laugh is to go on and on about this very funny character named Polybius, who lived back in the 2nd century or 3rd century BC. He was a Greek chap who wandered around with a chap called Scipio.
Libby Purves challenge.
It's terribly boring. Nobody's laughing. Therefore, it's deviation, because Polybius is not a sure way of getting a laugh, or we'd all have been laughing.
I hadn't got the punchline.
I think we've proved the fact that if Kenneth, when he talks about Polybius, it's a sure way of getting a laugh. I mean, they were hysterical.
If Tim Rice talks about
the lady
Polybius,
over there had to be carried out and be revived. No, I disagree with this challenge. I'm sorry, Libby. So, Tim, you keep the subject of a sure laugh starting now.
I think I will lay off the subject of this well-known southeastern European gentleman.
Kenneth, yes, I agree, Kenneth. So 44 seconds left for you on a sure laugh starting now.
A sure laugh is when you say to the lady, "Are you having another?" And she says, "No, it's just..." And she says, "No, it's just the way my coat's done up." I had to stop. I mean, I can't be challenged.
Well, the unfortunate thing was that particular lady in our audience was actually having another then. And so a mild hysteria swept through our audience. So I think the only fair thing is not to charge any points on that and let you continue on a sure laugh with 38 seconds left, starting now.
A sure laugh can definitely be obtained by the removal of trousers. This does confuse a lot of people, especially in farce where gentlemen are caught in the bedroom in a compromising situation with a knock at the door, heralding the arrival of someone who must never see them in such appallingly undignified condition. And people love it when they see them squirming and pulling the shirt down to cover their appalling embarrassment. And the same thing applies to the kick in the rear. Now then, when that occurs, always it gets a big laugh.
And another sure laugh is when Kenneth Williams takes over the subject and keeps going on it for as long as he did and gets that extra point, and he's now in the lead, equal! Equal with Libby Purves. And you couldn't care less, could you? But Peter will begin the next round, and Peter, the subject is rambling. Can you tell us something about that in the game, starting now?
I remember the man who raised this to an art form. It was Milton Hayes who preceded Oliver Wakefield as a sort of idiot on the radio, talking about politicians walking about in Rolls-Royce cars.
Tim Rice has challenged.
several abouts, certainly two very recently towards the end of that fascinating paragraph.
Yes, there were.
Yeah, there were.
Yeah, there were,
Yes,
I'm
quite
afraid,
right.
yes. 45 seconds for you, Tim, on the subject of rambling, starting now.
Rambling conjures up a host of wonderful images. I often feel like a tramp myself. I love wandering around the grounds.
Kenneth Williams charting.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought he said wandering twice, but I don't think he did. I beg your pardon.
I thought he did, Kenneth, as a matter of fact.
Yes,
I thought he did too.
Twice.
So, Kenneth, you have the subject
good, I was
of
right.
rambling with 38 seconds starting now.
Well, the comedian that Peter Jones mentioned immediately sprang to my mind, I must admit, when rambling came up as the subject, because he always said women in tight pink and men in pink tights going around showing their versatility.
Libby Purves challenged.
Pink twice.
Yes, there were two pinks.
Oh, what a shame.
Yes. So, Libby, we're into the last round, and it's almost equal out in the lead, and there are 26 seconds for you on rambling starting now.
I have learnt a good deal about rambling from listening to Kenneth Williams. In his metaphorical hiking shorts, he moves along the ridgeways of metaphor and down the...
Tim Rice.
Well, I thought we were going to get two metaphors there.
You didn't. You got metaphorical and metaphor.
I know.
So Libby keeps the subject, another point to her, and there are 17 seconds on rambling Libby starting now.
He passes through the leafy glades of Lytotes and along... He was looking at me, it's not fair.
No, it was such a clever dissertation, trying to not only speak in the game, but also give the analogies as you went, was just, I think, a bit too demanding, but well tried.
It
Tim,
is when
there are
Kenneth's
12
looking
seconds.
at you like that.
12 seconds for you, Tim Rice, on rambling starting now.
Rambling can take many, many forms. Can I go home?
I wouldn't. You're in the lead. But Libby has got a correct
How did
challenge.
you get in the lead with a technique like that?
Because you have been rather quiet on this particular occasion. Last time he was our guest, you won handsomely.
Ah,
You've
well,
been
thank you very much.
you've been very self-effacing.
Yes.
Modest on this occasion. Libby, you have 9 seconds on rambling starting now.
Rambling can only take one form, and that has been brought to perfection by Kenneth Williams. When he speaks...
Kenneth Williams
I'm
challenge.
afraid I have to challenge you. You mentioned Kenneth before.
Yes, and we can't have too much of Kenneth Williams.
Not like you to stop her mentioning your name.
You ungrateful hound.
So, Kenneth, you have a correct challenge, and you have the subject of rambling, and there are only 3 seconds left starting now.
As rambling Sid Rumpel, I used to say, let's stop by the wayside.
So, Kenneth Williams got the subject just before the end, kept it until the whistle went, gained an extra point, and has finished up in a strong position. Libby Purves, our guest this week, nearly won. She was only 1 point behind Tim Rice, our other guest, who finished up a joint winner with Kenneth Williams. So we do hope you've enjoyed listening to Just a Minute. We hope you've enjoyed watching it in the audience as much as we've enjoyed playing and performing it to you, until you'll tune in again at the same time next week and listen to us all again. Till then, from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Massiter and produced by Pete Atkin.
We present Kenneth Williams, Clement Freud, Giles Brandreth and Barry Cryer in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello and welcome again to Just a Minute. And this week, as you've heard, we have those two guests who did so well when they came together last time, Barry Cryer and Giles Brandreth. And they've come back to pit their wits, their brains, and their verbal ingenuity against our two regulars, Kenneth Williams and Clement Freud. Once again, I'm going to ask them to speak, if they can, on the subject that I give them, and they will try and do that without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from that subject. Let us begin the show this week with Giles Brandreth. Giles, the subject is a bad joke. That leaves plenty of scope, and there are 60 seconds as usual, starting now.
Coming here today, a bad joke occurred to me. I arrived at the underground station. There was this enormous sign that said dogs must be carried on the escalator. Well, it took me 40 minutes to find one because I was not travelling during peak hour. I heard a bad joke from a most unlikely quarter the other day when the Archbishop of Canterbury got up in his cathedral pulpit and said, "Hold on, chaps, we have been through far worse before. Remember that great and good man Noah who managed to float a limited company when the rest of the world was going into liquidation." Now, this sort of bad joke is not what we expect from soft lips Runcie. We expect something a little bit more spiritual and uplifting. I don't know whether bad jokes are good for the soul or not, but I think that when you get clergymen doing this, it is a disgrace. My great-grandfather, you know, was a Bow Street runner, and my great-grandfather, of course, was a Bond Street walker. Now, this strange duality of the pair of them is quite unwholesome and unhealthy, and the trouble is...
Barry Cryer has challenged.
Did I imagine it, or was it repetition of great-grandfather?
It was repetition, and I'm surprised no one picked him up quicker.
I'm sorry, my great-grandparents were funny that way. Hence the bad joke.
So Barry got the correct challenge. He gets a point for that. And there are 6 seconds for you to talk about bad jokes, Barry, starting now.
My favourite bad joke concerns a turtle and a gypsy woman. Down the road came a...
Well, when Ian Messiter blows his whistle, it tells us 60 seconds is up, and whoever is speaking at that moment gains an extra point. It was Barry Cryer, and at the end of the first round in this particular show, Barry is the only one to have scored any points. Barry, would you like to take the next round? The subject is kites. Will you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
Kites are birds of prey of the hawk family. Alternatively, kites are... No, you can say it.
You can repeat the word on the card.
He was hesitating.
But Giles has challenged you.
The introduction was hesitation, not repetition.
Yes.
Right. Fair enough.
But you can repeat the word on the card, Barry. I know you haven't played the game for a long time, but...
I know.
Giles actually got you for hesitation, which is correct. So, Giles, another point to you, and you take over the subject with 53 seconds on kites, starting now.
I flew my kite most recently on a trip to Northern Ireland, where I had gone to get away from it all. Indeed, I had actually gone there to finish my...
Barry Cryer.
Gone.
Yes, you'd gone too far. Repeat yourself. There are 46 seconds for you, Barry, on kites, starting now.
But the word is also applicable in the colloquial sense to aeroplanes, being used in that idiomatic connotation to describe the vessels in which...
Giles, you challenge.
Well,
not hesitation, surely.
This is my capacity as the Mother Teresa of this entertainment. I'm doing it sort of to help you out.
Sister Teresa.
Can I ask something? Are you two going to play the rest of the game all by yourselves?
No, we're just going to announce our engagement and leave.
We're just waiting for Clement and Kenneth to arrive.
Yes, that's right. Giles, 35 seconds on kites, starting now.
The reason I was actually...
Clement has arrived. Yes, what is it?
Just have arrived.
So we won't charge for that. 33 seconds on kites with you, Giles, starting now.
In fact, I was in that part of our beautiful principality because I was there to finish my novel, being a very, very slow reader. And it was all about a man who has a kite.
Clement Freud challenged.
Oh, everything. Repetition of very, and Northern Ireland is not our principality.
So, Clement, you have the subject of kites, and there are 25 seconds starting now.
In industry, a kite is something you float, like when you say, shall we run this up the flagpole and see who will salute? A sort of exploratory, industrial...
Giles.
The train has arrived very late indeed.
That's not a challenge.
No, there were several hesitations.
Yes, as we were waiting for it to run up the flagpole and so... Right, there was hesitation. Kites is back with you, Giles. 14 seconds starting now.
The kite is the most vicious of all the birds of prey. One sees it swooping and swirling over northern Wales, and when one sees it there, one is appalled because it may well descend.
Clement Freud challenge.
One sees it.
One sees. Yes. You had sees again, yes. 4 seconds, Clement. Kites starting now.
I think one of the most splendid developments in the kite is that you can now steer them.
So Clement Freud was then speaking when the whistle went, gained that extra point. And at the end of that round, he and Barry Crown and Giles Brandreth all have 3 points. Kenneth Williams doesn't have any, and Clement Freud begins the next round. In fact, we haven't yet heard from Kenneth, which is very unusual, but we'll make up for it later, I've no doubt. Clement, the subject is happiness. Will you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
Happiness is not hearing from Kenneth Williams.
Kenneth Williams.
Well, deviation. It's
Absolutely.
Absolutely disgrace. Incidentally, I've arrived.
And happiness now reigns throughout the audience. I would agree. Happiness is when we do hear from Kenneth Williams. So, Kenneth, you have the subject, and there are 57 seconds starting now.
Happiness can be a puppy or a little kitten, or sometimes people...
Very cry challenge.
Repetition of all.
You had 3 oars very rapidly there, yes.
A surfeit of oars.
52 seconds for you, Barry, on happiness, starting now.
Happiness is rhubarb and custard with the judicious introduction of mandarin oranges plunging, sinking to the bottom of the bowl, inviting the tongue and the palate, the taste buds to savour therein. The spoon is...
The 7th verse.
I'll have my verse and you have your oars.
So, hoisted on your own guitar, Barry.
True.
You're going to travel on the challenge on the
Very true.
Kenneth gets back. And 37 seconds, happiness, Kenneth, starting now.
A lady once said to me, I'm so happy when I see that wonderful canvas, sunset over Godalming. The moment brings back to me such transient, lucid memories of days of yore when I was a young gal running through the dewy grass and people ran through my hair.
Through.
Yeah, ran through. Barry, you have 12 seconds on happiness starting now.
Or, in addition, Blackpool.
Clement Freud challenge.
Another oar.
Yes, but he didn't have oar before. It was Kenneth who had 3 oars.
This is mine.
This is his own personal oar. There are 10 seconds on happiness. Still with you, Barry, starting now.
A stick of Blackpool rock written thereon all the way through, the name of the resort, titillating to the...
Freud challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes, I think so.
Pardon?
Pardon? Hesitation.
That was a meaningful pause.
Well, the way you were delivering, there wasn't a great deal of meaning to your style at that particular moment.
It's very hurtful.
I know, but we are
Very
like that in
hurtful,
just a minute. You know, we try to needle them to get them going, and
It's all right, carry on.
Barry, Clement got in with 2 seconds to go on happiness, starting now.
Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs.
So, in spite of Clement getting the Freud for speaking when the whistle went, Barry Cryer is still out in the lead, 1 ahead of him. Kenneth, your turn to begin. The subject, Clytie. Will you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
I can tell you something about Clytie indeed, because she was one of the daughters of Ahamos, the king of Babylon. And according to Greek mythology, she was loved by Helios, the god of light. Now then, he fancied a sister, which caused her considerable anguish and anger. So she went to her dad and told him what was going on. Whereupon the monarch had this poor girl buried alive. And even the god of light failed to get enough...
Clement Freud is challenged.
Repetition of God.
Yes, you mentioned the god before, god Helios before, now you had the god of light. So I'm sorry, it's repetition, Kenneth. And Clement's got in with 6.5 minutes to go on Clytie, starting now.
Is this the Chinese version?
This is the one to confuse them in Peking, yes. Clement, you've got about 6.5 seconds to go on Clytie, starting now.
And so it came to pass that on the first day of spring, Clytie went to her master, prostrated herself on the marble.
Kenneth Chance just before the whistle.
Yes, it didn't. She didn't prostrate herself on the first day of spring at all. That was the very, very, very other season that she prostrated herself.
But yes, how do we know that Clement wasn't talking about another Clytie?
No, he didn't know anything about her at all. He was just filling in.
Oh, let's be generous and give it to
No, we're not
Kenneth.
being generous. I know about Clytie and I want to discuss it.
Clement might have been talking about another Clytie. How do I know what Clytie was talking about? In the game, he can talk about any Clytie he knows.
You can't, because the whole point about it, if you really know about Clytie, is to say that she was turned into the bush which is today heliotrope.
No, if the subject was Clytie from Greek mythology...
No, that she is heliotrope. That's the whole point of it.
I'm going to put it to the audience. I'm not going to have this argument. If you agree with Kenneth, in other words, there's only one Clytie that we're talking about, but if it could be any Clytie, in which case you agree with Clement Freud, let us all either cheer for Kenneth and boo for Clement and all do it together now. You're prejudiced and biased, aren't you? Kenneth, they're on your side, so you take over the subject with half a second to go, starting now.
Yes, the poor girl became...
So, Kenneth
wasn't able to embroider. I should have been able to say that as the result of her anguish, she actually took root in the ground. That's the point of it, you see.
Yes. And
That's
then what
what I
happened?
wanted to make, drive home to this audience, because in that Greek mythological sense, the whole point about someone like Clytie is that she's comparable to Echo, because Echo loves Narcissus so much that she refuses to eat too, and she wastes away until only the voice is left wailing, and when your own voice comes back to you disembodied, you still say today, oh, that's an echo. And that's why it's so very beautiful. That's why it's marvellous about Clytie being heliotrope now today. When you see it, you can know then that this is the girl.
So all the heliotrope we see in our gardens is all from this Clytie you've taken root.
The anguish is all there embedded.
Kenneth, you were speaking as the whistle went quite some time ago, and you got an extra point for that. You are third place. Clement's in the lead, one ahead of Barry Cryer, and Giles is just behind you. And Giles, your turn to begin. The subject, Giles, is burglars. Will you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
I have met quite a few burglars in my time, and I'm not speaking of the people from the Customs and Excise. I'm referring to actual legitimate criminals. Some years ago, I was visiting Bristol Prison, just passing through, I assure you, when I saw a couple of burglars, felons, playing Scrabble. And I thought how curious it is that those entertained at the Queen's pleasure should play the game that is, in fact, the favourite entertainment of the monarch herself. I met a burglar once who was pigeon-toed, which means that he was half a bird and half a toad. Now, this made it very difficult for him to conduct his particular kind of robbery, because he was a cat burglar, which meant that he would actually climb up onto roofs and in a feline way troop about trying to get into windows, looking through the doors, and then he would pounce onto the bed and look under it, because there he was a chamber pot burglar. This is what obsessed him. He went all over the world.
Kenneth Williams,
What deviation? How could he be in 1 minute a cat burglar when he was pigeon-toed, and then suddenly he turns into a chamber pot burglar? I've never heard of it.
He wanted to grow cats in chamber pots so that one day they would inspire the world by being weeping pussies or weeping willows.
I think you're talking now a lot
Nurse,
of...
he's out of bed again.
Yes. You had established... I agree with Kenneth's challenge. There are 6 seconds for burglars with you, Kenneth, starting now.
It happened to me, and they pinched my old underpants, which would have fetched a fortune in Sotheby's, and I was absolutely mortified.
So Kenneth Williams has got some more points. He's moved ahead. He's equal with Barry Cryer in second place, 1 point behind our leader, who's still Clement Freud. It's a low-scoring game. Giles Brandreth is only 2 points behind our leader. Barry begins the next round, and the subject, rude rhymes. Barry, will you tell us something about those in the game, starting now?
You're an idiot, sir, said the girl to the chap one evening as they walked along. You tell me that love is a pain in the neck. In that case, you're doing it wrong. This is...
Giles,
I would never talk through applause as a professional artiste. You know that, Giles.
You can talk.
But it needed it. I wouldn't talk through these kind of
It
people.
was a seated ovation, and you hoped if you waited long enough, they'd get up.
Well,
you waited so long, several of them did get up, and they've now left.
Some of them lost the will to live during that. Is that counted as hesitation?
Yes, it is, but I'm not going to allow it, because we're going to hear some more rude rhymes from you. We're going to give you the benefit of the doubt. No points scored. 45 seconds left, starting now.
Well, he seems to have hesitated.
He does seem to have hesitated.
I thought somebody was going to clap, you see.
The gamut of his repertoire is one rude rhyme. Kenneth.
Apparently.
Yes. There are 44 seconds on rude rhymes with you starting now.
There was a young lady of Ride who ate some fruit and then died. The apple fermented. Inside the fermented made cider inside.
Yes.
Repetition of inside.
Yeah, one was inside her, inside.
That's right.
Inside. Yes,
well
there were
done.
two inside.
Well
That's
done.
Right, yes.
Good.
Yes. I mean, if they had an intellectual playing as the chairman, you would never get anywhere, would you? Kenneth, what are you doing to Clement Freud at this particular moment? I can't. So, Clement, you have 37 seconds for rude rhymes. I must tell the listeners that Kenneth is hiding behind Clement Freud, which is very strange from the position I regard them both, and it disturbed me very much. 37 seconds, Clement. Rude rhyme starting now.
The ideal rude rhyme for 37 seconds would consist of 35 of these being taken up with verbiage which was totally clean and proper, whereafter, just as the whistle was about to blow, some filthy epithet would tumble from one's lips. There was a young woman from Uppingham.
Charles, you challenged.
Yes, indeed. Well, with an election in the offing.
I mean, that wouldn't mean anything in China, would it? What would that mean? An election? What would they make of that?
We're back to China again.
Politicians stand there like anywhere else.
Yeah. And Nicholas Parsons keeps getting letters from China all the time, doesn't he? Saying, Mr. Thatcher, fell down here.
Yes, they have elections every so often, don't they? And, I think Giles actually challenged because he was, why did you challenge?
There was hesitation.
None of us remember.
There was hesitation.
Oh, no, it wasn't. He was trying to time it.
Acknowledges it. He was.
Yes. Oh, no, if you've got to start and try and time, I mean, I thought...
No.
It's
a perfectly legitimate...
The timing is the essence of politics, and he was trying to spin out this rude rhyme so he wouldn't be able to get out the
with a 20-second pause between lines, no.
Well, I'm going to see if he can do it. So, Clement, you still have
this is monstrous. Could you turn to the audience, please?
Resign.
Clement, you still have rude rhymes. 13 seconds, starting now.
Young folk who frequent picture palaces have no use for psychoanalysis, and although Dr. Freud is distinctly annoyed, they cling to their long-standing fallacies.
So, Clement, you really deserve the point for speaking as the whistle went and getting out the payoff right on the button there, as you might say. And you have now taken the lead ahead of Kenneth Williams, but not many points separate all three who are trailing behind you. Clement, your turn to begin. The subject... I know, it's all getting out of hand, really, isn't it? The subject, is marvellous, about things getting out of hand. Spoon bending, that's the next subject. It's all right, it's not as bad as all that. You have 60 seconds as usual, starting now.
Spoon bending is very trendy, and ideally you do it from a very great distance, like two ends of the universe, or one part of the ether from the other. Yuri somebody used to do it on the radio, which was terribly difficult because there was no way of it.
Kenneth Williams challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes, I think so too, Kenneth.
Really?
42 seconds on spoon bending with you, starting now.
It is an extraordinary phenomena because I watched...
Barry Cry challenged.
Phenomenon, isn't it?
One.
Phenomenon. Yes.
One phenomenon, two phenomena.
No, I could have seen it done several times. What are you talking about?
Yes, it's still it is singular.
Doesn't matter. We're not here to speak grammatically correctly. It doesn't matter how
Well, I
you
know,
speak, as long
you-
as you speak for 60 seconds. So shut your mouth. Nitpicking. Just silly. It's nitpicking. It's just ridiculous. Let's get on.
Well, I'm inclined to agree with you, because if we had you up for grammatical errors all through, we'd never...
Yes, they'd all be in the cart, wouldn't they, then? Yes.
And as we've already established a few weeks ago that people in China only listen to hear the good English, I think we should point out that we're going to let you have the benefit of the doubt.
We're all going yellow before this.
38 seconds, spoon bending, Kenneth, starting now.
I watched it done on the television, and they got this fella from the university, a real professor, no messing about, to give his opinion. And he said it's beyond me. It defies logical analysis. There is the metal actually bending in front of my eyes, and no heat, apparently, has been applied. Well, the fellow doing it, this fellow called
Clement Freud challenge.
Repetition of fellow.
There were two fellas, I'm afraid, in rapid succession, Kenneth, so 5.5 seconds. Spoon bending, Clement, starting now.
Well, spoon bending, what is this phenomenon that we don't want to is really terrific in that because where...
Clement got in before the whistle, kept it till the whistle, gained an extra point, increased his lead, and Kenneth William, who is just behind him in second place, is going to take the next round. And the subject, Kenneth, is what makes me come over all unnecessary? Clement challenged.
That's ungrammatical, too.
The whole point of the question is, you great fool, it's a colloquialism. You might as well say Bob's your uncle is ridiculous, because it doesn't mean okay at all, unless you've got an uncle called Bob and nobody has. But when they say, well, you're all right, Bob's your uncle, it means everything's fine. That's what it means. It's colloquial, you great fool. Great
Repetition of fool.
Right, let's get back to the game. Kenneth, the subject is what makes me come over all unnecessary. 60 seconds starting now.
Undoubtedly it is something which produces an emotional effect, and then I find myself covered in embarrassment, and I do come over all unnecessary. I don't like people seeing me in this ignoble condition, because after all, we want, don't we, our dignity, and what do we any of us live for but our illusions, and what do we ask for others?
Barry Crouch.
Deviation from the subject, we still haven't found out what makes Kenneth come over all unnecessary. He's describing his unnecessary state.
Yeah,
and the manifestations of the same, and the
you were talking
symptoms,
about
but
your
not
illusions
what causes
and so,
it.
Yes, not what makes me, but you were talking about your illusions and so forth. So, Barry, I agree with you, and you have 33 seconds on what makes me come over all unnecessary, starting now.
What makes me come over all unnecessary, i.e. embarrassed, is the confrontation with Kenneth, the master of wordplay, the silver tongue of this program, when I am guilty of a verbal colloquialism that is inaccurate, inept, maladroit, and has no place in the general tenor of my...
Clement Freud's challenge.
I don't like this boasting.
Oh, what a good challenge. Give him a bonus point. And as Barry wasn't deviating from the subject, he continues with what makes me come over all unnecessary. It's the last round. There are 14 seconds left, starting now.
The confrontation causes my skin to go crimson, the hair to prickle on the back of my neck, because I am embarrassed, at a loss, and unable to glean which way to turn.
Giles Brandreth has challenged.
Embarrassed, we had it before.
Yes, you did have embarrassed before. When you were speaking before, that's right. Yes.
I remember.
So Giles has got in with only 2 seconds to go. What makes me come over all unnecessary, Giles? Starting now.
Mary had a little lamb. The doctors were surprised.
Well, as I said, this was going to be the last round. Let me tell you that in the final analysis of this game, Charles Brandreth finished up in 4th place, just behind Barry Cryer, who was only 1 point behind Kenneth Williams, who was a few points behind this week's winner, Clement Freud. And we do hope you've enjoyed this edition of Just a Minute, enjoyed listening to it as much as we've enjoyed playing it, and we'll be tuning in again when Just a Minute once more takes to the air and we all play this delightful game. Till then, from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by Pete Atkin.